So, it's clear that ever since Julia Hart decided to join the House of Black, that the Varsity Blondes have fallen off a cliff. It doesn't help that Griff Garrison had to get surgery and that the group hasn't wrestled since the October Dark tapings. As for Brock Anderson, he hasn't been doing that well either. He hasn't gotten a lot of TV time since Cody left, although he has been a good presence on Dark. It's clear he might need some form of new direction, which is why I'm here to make this faction good. I'm Sleazy C with some fantasy tea. We start our story in February, with the Varsity Blondes over the course of a few weeks on Rampage, with the first match being the match to get back their trademark to the Varsity Blondes from Tony Nese. Then the next 3 matches, they start to and eventually go full heel. So they essentially become like 80s jocks, but without it being overly corny, because, AEW can make it work. Now, in that same time, Brock Anderson starts a losing streak with his father by ringside every time, starting to make him question if his father is holding him back. Then, the 2 worlds collide on Rampage, when Brock's alone in the locker room, and the Blondes run into him, and they are very impressed, so they start to persuade him to team up with them. But then his dad scares them away, but Brock is subtly pissed about it. These swaying segments continue for 2 weeks on Rampage, having Brock increasingly but subtly pissed with his dad controlling what he does, until finally the 2 sides, Arn and the Varsity Blondes, have an intervention on Rampage about which side he'll take. At first, he hugs his dad during the intervention, making it seem like he's with Arn, and then turns it into a suplex. Now Brock is given a number 4 varsity jacket by Griffin Pillman, thus becoming the Varsity Blondes leader. Now, the Varsity Blondes will have a cool little inner dynamic with their 80s habits as bullies, but some good old inner turmoil in modern day that they always have to overcome to remain a faction. With Brock as the leader, Pillman as the enforcer and right-hand man, and Griff as the runt who can win on his own sometimes, but can never win the big one without help, and is usually just the rat of the group. Now that the dynamic is set up, it's time for their first mini-feud, which could either be House of Black or the Trustbusters on Rampage, but I'm going to go with the Trustbusters on this one, as it'll tie into a possible future fantasy tea. But if you want a Blondes vs. House of Black feud, let me know in the comments. This is a challenge to book as it's 2 heel factions, but something could be worked here, and it all has to do with Griff, because the Varsity Blondes are eventually going to go for the trios titles, so they start using psychological bully tactics. So before their match with Trustbusters on Rampage in a week, Brock sends Griff to spy on Ari Daivari, either on BT or Rampage segments, you decide, in which he overhears Daivari's out of money when he's speaking to his butler in the locker room, and he's using bad checks until he can get his trust reordered. Afterwards, Griff heads back to Brock and Pillman and inform them of what has happened. By then, they decide to tell each member of the Trustbusters about the situation. By the time the match starts, the entire Trustbusters team is not cooperating, or even trying for that matter, leaving Trustbusters leader Daivari very confused. Eventually, the Varsity Blondes win, with Sunny Kiss letting Pillman get his finisher off. And then when the Varsity Blondes are celebrating, Slim J, the butler, and Sonny Kiss, because I'm pretty sure fucking Parker went to Swerve or something, I don't know how that works, they gang up on Ari and beat the crap out of him, essentially busting the Trustbusters. This short rivalry is to show that these guys will do whatever it takes to win by any means necessary. Even if it means destroying teams and using psychological warfare, they're up for it. Their next feud is with the Firm, as they deny to join, so Hathaway gets Ethan Page, Matt Hardy, and Isaiah Cassidy to bully them into doing it with a no-holds-barred match. Now, you may be wondering, why these three specifically? Well, if you've been watching Dark, you see the dynamic going on between Ethan Page, Matt Hardy, and Isaiah Cassidy, where, he's getting more and more pissed at Matt Hardy, and Ethan and Matt are kind of teaming up together, so he's kind of pissed. He is pissed. But Hathaway's not counting on them taking it to psychological realms. Once again, Griff is sent to get things done. Overhearing how unhappy Isaiah Cassidy is with Ethan Page and Matt Hardy, he gets a moment alone with him and tells him that Matt is Ethan Page 2.0 and that he's so far gone. And if Isaiah lets them win and betrays the duo every way he subtly can, then he can join the Varsity Blondes, which he readily agrees because he's sick of Matt's shit. Soon, the match arrives, and Isaiah is making things very hard for the firm to win, and Pillman is continuously going after Ethan Page, so he can't do his little Mike shenanigans that he's always done, which those are very funny. You should check those out on Dark. Soon enough, Ethan Page is put through a table by Pillman and Brock, and when Isaiah is tagged in by Matt, he gets a surprise roll-up from Griff Garrison and doesn't attempt to kick out, giving the Varsity Blondes another win. However, as Ethan and Matt see he's done with the firm and that he's leaving, Brock gets on the mic and says something like, "By the way, your hair's not blonde and we don't really need you." Kind of like Adam Cole. You see where this is going? And the Varsity Blondes beat the crap out of him and write him off TV, and making it so the firm can't compete for the trios titles. So far, they've racked up wins on psychological warfare, but their next opponents will require some new strategies. As they prepare for a match with the Factory, they decide demoralization is in order. So on Dynamite, they all come out and start talking about how Daddy Rhodes isn't here anymore and to at least get them a win, and how the more this faction lingers, the more it continues to keep the careers of those in the group more and more stale. They're so desperate for people to join them, they take a literal factory worker on board, and how they'll become the most irrelevant and forgettable thing in all of professional wrestling. Then the match starts, but the Factory are mostly unaffected, except for Go-Go, as the Cody feud thing affected him the most, because it's now true he's just with these guys and hasn't done anything meaningful since then. So Garrison and Anderson start attacking the rest of the stable as Go-Go and Pillman fight it out in the ring. Eventually, Pillman gets off an air Pillman. 1, 2, 3. And thus the Factory lose, beaten up and bruised, and Anthony Ogogo severely demoralized. Now, the Varsity Blondes are up to 3rd in the rankings. Only 2 teams, and they'll get their shot at the AEW Trios titles. However, the next team will be hard to crack from any psychological standpoint, and that's the BCC. By which point Yuta and Claudio lose their ROH championships, because if there's one thing I won't do is book any ROH titles on AEW. We've had enough of that in 2022, oh my god. And so, the trio of Claudio, Yuta, and Moxley go after the trios titles. The thing is though, this stable can't be cracked through mouthing at them anything, so the Varsity Blondes decide to make their upcoming match with the BCC a first blood match. And during that match, they coordinated, so Jon Moxley is tagged in after being beaten hard by Brock Anderson. And soon Pillman gets a headlock, and soon Jon Moxley starts to bleed, giving the Varsity Blondes another win and putting them 2nd in the rankings. Now, I know I'm breezing through these matches, but I'm trying to define key points that matter to the overall climb and adding of depth to this faction. But now, we come to the big first feud, the first big feud of the Varsity Blondes with Death Triangle, as I'm sure, hopefully, that there will be some good old long-term storytelling with them and the Elite. I mean, seriously, if they don't have a long-term story with the Elite other than the Series 7 thing, then they were just transitional champs the whole time, and I'm going to be pissed off for the rest of my life. And while all that was happening, the Varsity Blondes climbed up the ladder. So we begin with Death Triangle, who have continuously lost to the Elite at every major corner for the past 3 to 4 months since first losing the belts. However, they still stick together after all of that. Pac starts talking about how the Varsity Blondes are nothing and they shouldn't even be here, how the Death Triangle will be the only ones who will ever challenge the Elite like they will. Then the Varsity Blondes come out, and Brock Anderson takes the mic and starts saying, "You know something, Lucha Bros? I see that Pac is starting to turn down the path that my dad unfortunately took. He felt he was right all the time. He was only doing things for himself. He only saw the world in tunnel vision. Honestly, Pac is going down this path. He now has a hammer fetish. You guys have been doing nothing but losing. You guys haven't even held a title in months, and it's all thanks to Pac. Deny it all you want, Hammer Lover, but these two will hopefully know better than to hang out with a loser like you. If not, we will make sure they know it before our match, so you'll never be able to compete for the Trios titles again." The next 2 weeks leading to Double or Nothing consist of the Varsity Blondes psychologically bullying the faction, making it seem like they're helping, but they really want Death Triangle to be at each other's throats. And just before their match, they beat down Pac to get him going crazy and looking like the most demented man in the locker room. Which when the Lucha Bros see him just before their match and he's just being crazy, the Lucha Bros quietly decide they'll just fight the match. If they lose, they'll ditch Pac. The match starts and Brock Anderson and Penta start brutally going at it. Plenty of hard hitting, slamming, hard flying action as these two fight brutally and tough. After 7 minutes of this, when Brock's chucked to the corner, he tells Griff to go after Phoenix, and he does, leading to the two fighting outside of the ring, taking the two out of the match as they fight each other with high-flying action. After 2 more minutes, Penta is out of energy, and so makes a hot tag to Pac, in which case Brock tags to Pillman to try and wear Pac down. Penta is all but out of the match. However, even though Pillman's wearing down Pac, Pac's wearing down Pillman faster, and he gets a sneaky hammer shot when the ref's not looking. But as he collapses, he makes the tag to Brock. You know, just you could imagine him falling down, and then he makes a reach, and then he tags Brock. Like 80s. The two stare down at each other before starting to slobber knock the crap out of each other, with Pac looking more and more crazed by the minute. Eventually, he starts getting more agile, dodging more of Brock's attacks and starts high-flying moves, but Brock counters all of them. So eventually, with little choice, 17 minutes, 3 minutes remaining in the match, he tries to get a hammer shot on Brock, but he straight up punches it out of his hand and slams him to the mat. 1, 2, 3, Varsity Blondes win, with Brock saying down to Pac, "Now you've got nothing!" As the Varsity Blondes soak in their victory, the Lucha Bros collect themselves, and backstage, drive away without Pac, leaving him all alone. After the number 1 contenders match, the Varsity Blondes come out and start bragging about their accomplishment, killing Death Triangle to finally claim their shot to the Elite's titles. Then Brock Anderson takes the lead. You know, I think there are only 2 reasons why they're holding those belts. Number 1, because of that bomb that dropped in August and is demanding reparations for it, but the second and main reason is Kenny's become the weakest of his own group. He needed some form of gold to show that he's still as strong as he was when he was holding the world title, but he's honestly been in decline since he lost to that cowboy Hangman. Now he hides with Don Cal Bitch and the Bucks to make it seem like the reason they're here are on his talents, when really, he's become nothing more than a stale joke. He passes the lead to Pillman. Not sure if you get it, Bucks, but you honestly should go back to tag teaming, instead of being a trio with Kenny like you are now, as he crutches on the both of you to be in this division. to have claim to gold that he has had the least effort getting in a team effort, whilst we have worked together hard day and night to become the only ones who can challenge you. But let's be real, a loser like you, who hangs around a creepy old man and 2 others to stay relevant, is so sad for you. Then the Elite come out and Kenny starts going, "Now hold on there, blondies. I don't know where you get off saying shit that isn't true. But the only sad joke I see is the stable I'm looking at right now. The only reason you guys are here is because Brock has daddy issues. And you want to talk about weak links? I'm looking at you, Griff Garrison!" Brock charges off a reply. "Now hold on! Griff has been here from the start, and without him, this great faction wouldn't exist, so leave him alone." Now, this bit is to show that whilst Griff does a lot of the runt rat work, he is still important to Pillman and Brock, but at the same time, those words from Kenny will haunt him. Then Don Callis grabs the mic. "Okay, so you boys want to talk shit about Kenny? How about Brock and Kenny fight it out in the steel cage match next Wednesday, and then you get your title shot?" Brock responds, "Okay, but just know this, Kenny. Him making decisions for you will be the biggest mistake that you continue to make for the rest of your life." The day of the match arrives, and the Varsity Blondes are backstage hyping up Brock. However, before they go out, Brock says to Griff, "Hey, no matter what happens, know you are truly necessary to the group. And I mean that in every sense." Pillman backs him up and says, "Yeah, without you, we wouldn't be here today." Griff thanks them, feeling a lot better about what was said last week. Soon, they make their entrance after Kenny Omega's already in the ring. The two hyping up the crowd to chant Brock's name, and they do so. Brock soaks it in as he enters the ring for his match. The Varsity Blondes are on commentary with Taz and Jim Ross, as they are also standing guard in case of the Elite's interference. The match soon starts in the steel cage, with Brock immediately going in hard hitting, taking Kenny Omega by surprise, but he soon starts fighting back, chucking Brock into the steel cage wall and starts wailing on him, giving him a DDT, a super kick, all sorts of hard hitting moves to try and end things quickly. Brock is getting more and more bloody, but is undeterred and fights back with hard punches and suplexing into the cage wall. He tries getting the pin, but Kenny kicks out at 2, and they continue just wailing on each other, punch after punch, move after move, for 25 bloody brutal minutes. Then, Kenny gets out a one-winged angel, and starts trying to climb out of the cage. All seems lost, but Brock somehow manages to get up slowly as Kenny struggles to get out, and just before it's too late, Brock jumps up, grabs him, and yanks him down, slamming him onto the ring, and he continues to go hard on him. At 27 minutes, the Elite rush out to try and help, but Griff and Pillman get out of commentary to hold them off, leaving Kenny distracted, and then Brock gets off his finisher and pins Omega. 1, 2, 3. Brock Anderson manages to pin Omega, leaving everyone stunned. But as Brock starts to soak it in, Arn Anderson's music starts to play. And he comes out with a 2x4 and starts going after Griff and Pillman, smacking them both in the back with a 2x4. Brock is stunned and pissed at the same time with his bloody appearance, as the Elite and Arn exit all together. A week after the Kenny Brock match, Tony Schiavone gets a chance to talk to Arn Anderson backstage, and he starts saying, "First, Tony, I have made sure that Tony Khan has prohibited the Varsity Blondes from coming round here, so I can safely say what I have to. The reason I joined with the Elite are simple. First, I need to teach my disappointing son that betraying the family name and turning their back on the man who gave them a career in the first place, he needs to learn the hard way that acting like this has consequences. Same goes with Griff and Pillman. They have disappointed their family names, and I'm joining the Elite temporarily to bring this faction down and straighten them out." However, the Varsity Blondes were watching backstage, and they seemed completely unfazed and undeterred by Arn. Over the next few weeks on BTE, they'd be seen bullying other wrestlers, factions, as that's what they do, and the Elite would sometimes show up to save the wrestler involved. But the Varsity Blondes would always run away. Then the 23rd comes, and the Varsity Blondes come out to the ring to talk. Brian takes the lead. We're not out here to impress the ladies tonight, as we have some serious things to say about those losers. The Elite and Arn Anderson. They think they can hold us down. They think it's possible to stop us from becoming World Trios champs. Well, that's not happening. We refuse to be held back by the fact that they are EVPs. We're not going to lose or fail because they're portrayed as the good guys in some form. And we're certainly not going to lose because that old jackass Arn Anderson is too senile to admit he offered nothing of use to anyone at the age he's at, other than a decent role in a now 11-year-old video game. Also, you guys have talked shit about our teammate Griff, so let's hear what he has to say next. He passes the mic to Griff Garrison. Kenny, you want to call me a wink link? You want to call me the joke of the soon-to-be World Trios champs? Well, let me tell you something. I won't be more than the runt. The reason it seems that way is because that's what other people say. Well, guess what? If I wasn't doing the runt work, our team wouldn't be nearly as half as good as it is today. We know our roles, we know how to stay synchronized, how to persevere, adapt, survive, and Kenny, you won't survive next week with me. Same goes for everyone else, as I made a special request for this match, and the whole team agrees on this. But I and everyone else should hear it from our leader, Brock. Now this is going to be a reference to what Jon Moxley did, so don't be surprised. From, this past week. He passes the mic to Brock. Let me tell you how it's going down for you Elite jackass wannabes. In 3 words. Texas Tornado Deathmatch. You want to talk all this crap about us? Try and make us betray each other? Thinking just because you're EVPs, Founding Fathers, the only 2-time Trios champs, although that title should be revoked in the first place. Well, that means nothing. If you can't survive, if you can't get incredibly bludgeoned and still keep going, if you still have the strength and stamina to even attempt to beat us, it doesn't matter who you are, adapt or die. One more thing. Dad, if you so much as interfere in this match. He then nods to Griff. He goes under the ring and pulls out a steel 4x4 and brings it to Brock Anderson as he holds it over his head. Then I'll take the new Glock and put it to your forehead, ending your career in pro wrestling in a hospital bed. And now, here we are, May 29th, Double or Nothing, and the main event is the Elite versus the Varsity Blondes. I imagine when the Varsity Blondes make their entrance, there's 2 lines of tons of cheerleaders cheering them on and confetti and stuff. Kind of like what high school football pre-hype is all about in the 80s. And the Elite would probably do some basketball stuff as part of their more epic intro or something. I don't know. The match starts, and it first starts with an all-out brawl between the 2 sides, just trying to clobber each other to get the upper hand. However, it's completely even, so the action starts going outside the ring as there's a flurry of action from all sides. Pillman trying to get a hard kick on Nick, Brock trying to clobber the crap out of Matt, and then Griff and Kenny going at it with high-flying moves, quick speed, and all sorts of antics. Eventually, Brock gets Matt back into the ring and starts chucking him into the now ripped-off turnbuckles and smashing his face into them. But then Nick comes in, managing to ward off Pillman enough to get a super kick off Brock Anderson, making him go down for a bit, and Matt escorted Nick outside the ring by the belt post, before going into the ring and trying to get the pin. But Brock kicks out, as he isn't even close to being done. Meanwhile, Pillman gets it together and goes in to help Griff Garrison with Kenny Omega, grabbing some chain, wrapping it around his fist, and punching Kenny in the neck, bringing him to the floor, and Brian continues wailing on Kenny, bloodying him even more. After he's done, he goes over to Matt, who was recovering by the bell. He was still feeling completely out of it, and so after helping Brock Anderson completely knock out Nick, they both get Matt into the ring and do a combined spine buster air Pillman finisher, and Pillman gets the 1-2-3 on Matt, eliminating him from the match. However, Pillman didn't notice Nick sneak in and get a surprise roll-up on Pillman and pins him to 3. Now it's just down to 2 apiece. And Don Callis soon comes in with a steel chair to try and help Kenny with Griff, but Pillman wailed on him, making it much harder for Don to get to Kenny's aid. As that happens, Brock and Nick are going at it hard in a now semi-destroyed arena with no turnbuckles, and some of the mat starts to tear up. Griff soon comes in and assists the beatdown of Nick. However, Nick was wearing them down for Kenny, but they didn't know. By the time Nick was pinned, Griff and Brock were starting to feel exhausted. Soon, Kenny Omega finally rejoined the fray after Don Callis managed to squeeze through to help. Now Kenny had to face both Griff and Brock. However, he decided to chuck Griff out of the ring, as he saw him as a waste of energy, leaving Griff on the floor for a while. Soon, Brock and Kenny start going at it again, like they did last time. However, it only lasts for 10 minutes, as after Brock is seeping, covered in blood, Brandon Cutler pepper sprays him, and Kenny tries to get the pin, but at the last possible moment, Brock hits out. Mere pepper spray couldn't stop him. Then, Arn comes out from the crowd with his wooden 2x4. Brock sees this and reaches for his steel 4x4. And a serious but also minorly funny clash between the two with their weapons happen. Arn manages a hit on Brock's side. However, Brock manages to break Arn's 2x4 and whack him in the forehead with his 4x4, knocking out his dad. And Don quickly rushes him out of the arena. But Kenny takes advantage of Brock's weakened state, brings him back into the ring for an incredibly devastating one-winged angel. He gets the pin, and he rolls Brock out of the ring. Now the outside of the ring is nothing but bodies. Pillman's still there and is the least hurt, but Matt and Nick are out cold on the floor, and Brock could barely stand up, so Pillman assisted him to a chair. It was just Kenny Omega and Griff Garrison. They both get into the ring, stare each other down, and Kenny says, "If you know what's best for you, lay down like the jobber you are," which instantly pisses Griff off, and he gets devastating punches on Kenny, taking him to the mat, and he gets a moonsault off. But soon Kenny reorganizes and starts taking the fight back to Griff, getting even harder and harder hits in. And soon he runs under to the ring and grabs 2 sets of chains and wraps them around his fist and gets a flurry of punches onto Griff Garrison, seemingly knocking him out. Brian tries to intervene at the pin, but Matt manages to trip him over as Kenny pins down Griff. 1, 2, kick out. Griff is out to prove something. This is about more than the Trios Championships now. It's about proving to Kenny he is no jobber. He is no joke. He will make Kenny pay for his words tenfold. Meanwhile, Kenny is completely baffled at how Griff was this resilient. He expected this out of Brock, not Griff the runt jobber. Soon, Griff goes complete and utter destruction mode, Irish whipping Kenny into each corner of exposed turnbuckle 4 times, and then continues with devastating move after devastating move. Kenny is still in there, but barely, and soon Griff knows what he must do. He yells to Brian, "Get a table!" As he starts carrying Kenny Omega to the entrance place, Brian gets a table and Griff lays him out onto the table. He then goes to the back and gets a ladder and goes on top of the Tron. Kenny tries to arouse, but Brian won't let him, until at last, Brian gets out of the way and Griff Garrison dives onto Kenny Omega. The ref determines Kenny's been completely knocked out, and so calls for the bell. After a bloody, painful, and agonizing climb and war, the Varsity Blondes celebrate as the new Trios champs, with Brock finally having enough energy to walk. The cheerleading squads rush out, lift the champs above themselves as they celebrate the fact they're now on the top of the mountain. But Griff is especially happy as he has proved to everyone he is more than just a runt. But still, deep down, those words still sting him. That will come back to haunt him later, but for now, the Varsity Blondes celebrate their crowning and all the effort they put in. A week after winning the Trios titles, they come out opening the show on Dynamite to celebrate winning the Trios titles, celebrating with all sorts of cheer girls and football and stuff, because that's what jocks do. Then Brock grabs the mic. We brought them home! We brought home the trios titles to the best team in AEW, the Varsity Blondes. No one is on our level as a faction, as we have endured the most pain, made the most sacrifices, and destroyed everyone in our path to reach the top of the mountain. However, before he can pass the mic to Brian, wild things starts, and the BCC come out to the ring, with Moxley speaking first. Well, look what we got. A bunch of blonde-ass bitch boys. You guys have done nothing but cheat, destroy, and pounded down the entire roster to get those belts. Now I will admit, you boys got something. You boys went through the absolute bloodiest match in our sport, and it looked like a murder scene at the end. I'm impressed. That's usually something I would do. However, the thing you need to know is now you're the champions. This ain't some little football fantasy tale. This isn't some movie where you can all fade off into the sunset. No, you have to come out here and on Rampage, Dark, Elevation, Collision. Yes, I think that show will exist by then. Don't judge me. And wrestle your asses off to defend those straps. So watch your backs, because there's blood in the water, and you'll have to try and not get eaten alive by the sharks in this company. With that, the BCC make their exit. Later on in the show, the Varsity Blondes are backstage trying to comprehend what it was that the BCC meant, when suddenly the BCC brings down their door, and soon a brawl breaks out backstage. No, not brawl out, shut up. They fight everywhere backstage. And for the rest of the show, we'll see glimpses of them during other people's flomos or something. And at the end, the Varsity Blondes finally manage to chase off the BC. But barely, as they're battered, bruised, bloody, and they have to make an escape in their tour bus. A match between the two for Road Rager for the title is set. However, before the match, the BCC is seen setting the Varsity Blondes tour bus on fire, and John Moxley says to the camera, "Hey blonde boys, now you got nowhere to run. You'll be trapped with the sharks tonight." The Varsity Blondes see this on the monitor and are shocked and enraged. So as they make their entrance, they cut the music and await the arrival of the BCC. Soon, the BCC comes in with all sorts of weapons, and they start the fight outside the ring with no bell rung. Both teams bludgeoning each other for 4 minutes outside the ring. Eventually, the match is called off, and it takes 20 security guards and several wrestlers to break up these two factions from each other. So Tony Khan makes a special announcement that these two teams would fight for the trios titles at Blood and Guts in a Blood and Guts match. But for the match to happen, both teams must stay off TV and away from each other until this match. So we don't see them until that day, as they'd probably need a break time from screen time. I would love a break after getting bludgeoned for multiple weeks. We arrive at Blood and Guts, but I think you know how it'll go. It'll be like Varsity Blondes' match against the Elite, except the rings actually stay in good condition. And I'm mostly skimming over this match, but just know it'd be like a great 40-minute match of good old caged hardcore wrestling, just like anything else you see. But eventually, Brock manages to make Moxley pass out for the win, and the Varsity Blondes retain their titles. Afterwards, they go on a vacation, hanging out with hot girls, going to the beach, surfing, doing typical jock things during the summer in the 80s. We'd see this all on BTE, and they'd be gone until the August 16th episode of Dynamite, where they'd come back and do a backstage interview, with Brock as usual taking the lead. Our reign has hit 80 days. However, a lot of that time was spent recovering from those brutal assaults from the BCC. But now, they're a non-factor. So just tell us, who's next? Because the class of radical domination is back in session. And they all do a Varsity Blondes chest bump or something. The next few weeks are the Varsity Blondes defending their titles against various trios who aren't actually teams. Like Workhorseman and Colt Cabana or something. Also, September 5th, their reign reaches 100 days. And they do all these defenses on Rampage. Just get something attention to that show. It goes on like this until the October 6th edition of Rampage, where they again beat the random faction of the week, but then the lights go black. And when they come back on, the House of Black are there in the ring, staring down the Varsity Blondes. The Varsity Blondes are shocked, and then they are shown to Julia Hart, leaving Brian and Griff in a mess of emotions. But before anything else happens, the HOB disappears. And that's where we'll leave things today. Now, before we go, just gonna introduce the fantasy counter, where we keep track of the amount of time someone reigns with the championship. Mainly the protagonists, but if you guys also want me to cover other characters in the stories, title reigns, just for some coolness or something, let me know in the comments. So, the current reign of the Varsity Blondes in this series is at 131 days as of October 6th. We begin on BTE, where the Varsity Blondes are in their locker room after their encounter with the House of Black, with Brock starting, "Who was that woman?" And Brian explains, "That's Julia. She used to be our main cheerleader. She loved us. Then, she lost an eye, just vanished. Now she's there, but Brock interjects, Look, if she's that important, then maybe we should fight to free her from the House of Black's pull, but for now, we need to focus on what matters, because Tony's informed me we will be defending our titles against the House of Black at full gear, so we need to prepare like the badasses we are." Griff Garrison was being awfully quiet, and Brock noticed this. "Hey Griff, you alright?" Griff responds, saying, "I don't know, it's just Julia looked at me so wickedly, and I don't know, I'm just not feeling good. It's been so long since she..." And then... But Brian interjects, "Okay, I think we all just need to relax for a bit. We haven't exactly relaxed since we came back in August." Brock caves. "You're right. Let's just head down to the cafeteria for some pizza. What do you guys say?" Brian agrees, but Griff still feels down. "I think I'll just stay back here if that's cool with you guys." Brock was about to say something, but Brian gives him a look, and Brock caves again. "Alright, you're clearly shook, so you can relax by yourself. But if you feel better, then you can come hang out with us." So Brock and Pillman go to hang out in the cafeteria, and Griff's left all alone. Suddenly, he hears a voice. "You're a jobber." Then another. "You're why I'm with them." Griff starts looking around the room as the power starts to surge. More voices keep getting in his head. This goes on and on for 2 minutes, until there's a knock at the door. He slowly heads to the door, and when he opens it, he sees Julia Hart, twisted head, with no eyes, blood coming out of her mouth, and she's with Buddy Murphy and Brody King. Outside of Griff's vision, it's actually Dark Order thinking it was Jungle Boy and trying to recruit him into their group. Before they can say anything, Griff screams and attacks all three, chucking them away and beating them down before slamming the door. Brock and Pillman hear the commotion and rush down to their locker room to see the Dark Order collecting themselves, and also seeing some blonde hairs on the floor. Brock yells at them, "Hey! You bothering Griff Garrison? Going to our locker room?" Dark Order tries to defend themselves, but it's no good. "This Rampage, you guys are gonna get your asses collectively kicked." Dark Order runs away, leaving Brock and Brian to check on Griff, and he's sat in a state of shock, which is what sets up their next match on Rampage. When the match comes and the bell is rung, Brock and Pillman see an aggression in Griff they haven't seen since Double or Nothing. He was just unmercifully beating John Silver into a pulp. They were too distracted with this to go after Uno and Reynolds, which means they got the leg up on them fighting outside in the ring. But John still just keeps getting beaten to a pulp by Griff, and soon Griff gets the 1, 2, 3. Even then though, Griff still keeps going, and it takes Brian and Brock to pull him away from John. When they're back in the locker room on BTE, Brian and Brock are concerned with Griff Garrison, and so when they meet back at the locker room, Brock says, "I think we might need another vacation. Clearly, we need to decompress and relax before our championship match. So, where do we want to go?" So they eventually decide to go to a beach party that was advertised in the hallway. However, on BTE, when they arrive, they see the House of Black. They are once again stunned, but Griff charges at them. Before he can land a hit though, they disappear. Griff says, "It wasn't just me seeing them, right?" Brock and Brian had indeed seen the House of Black. But then, before they had time to recollect, they are all swept down, and there stood Julia Hart. She took her gaze directly to Griff. "It's a pity you're still around. You're so blasé, so unoriginal, and so useless. You're the reason why I left!" Her face becomes horrifically hollowed like last time, but Brian and Brock are there and try to shove her off of Griff, but she yells a scream that pushes them back. Then she grabs Griff Garrison and disappears with him. Brian and Brock are in shock and in rage as they run back to their rebuilt tour bus. That next Dynamite, they come out with Brian this time taking the lead. "Cut the music! House of Black, you took our brother from us, and we refuse to leave until he is set free. But mark my words, at Full Gear, you will live in fear of us as your shitty little house crumbles." Then the lights go out, and when they come back on, the House of Black are there with a passed out Griff Garrison on the floor. Brian and Pillman quickly take him back, and just as quickly as they appeared, they disappeared. But then, the Titantron comes on, showing Malachi Black, and he starts saying, "The ones who never grow, the ones who never see themselves within the wrong side of a fight, the ones with the spirit of a lion, but the weakness of a turtle. Brock, Pillman, we took the one called Grift from you, scar upon him 1,000 more scars. We've watched you since you got your original claim to your birth name. We see all, and we've seen Griff. He is the weakest lion in your pack, and so that is why we had our dear Julia whisk him away from your presence, as we thought he'd be the easiest to wither into another night to fight for the house. But we couldn't. His lion's spirit was the thing we could not overcome, so we scarred him brutally so his spirit, his resolve, would weaken. Know this too, he did not cave easily through our methods, even to the point of him having a shattered body. He did not cave. However, know this, from now unto forever, don't expect your lives to be the same as they used to. Because now, you understand how much more harm can be inflicted upon to yourselves than whatever damage you do upon to the world in which you live in." Then, he walks away, and the Titantron goes back to normal. Brock and Pillman are stunned, but quickly refocus their attention on Griff Garrison as they rush him to the hospital. On BTE, we see Griff being cleared by the doctors to leave, as he had healed well and his physical recovery went very quickly. However, he He's still incredibly shook by the whole thing. And just outside is Brock and Pillman. Brock says, "Hey man, you okay?" Griff says, "I'm okay." Brian says, "You think you'll be good to defend our titles? We can bully Tony into rescheduling it if you..." But Griff interjects, "No, we need to defend these titles. Those guys, they're incredibly messed up. And if we can't keep these titles from them, who knows what they'll do. So let's get out there, train our asses off, and prepare to kick their emo asses from starting an orgy." Brock and Brian agree to this, and they do their varsity chest bump as they began training hard for their defense of the trios titles at Full Gear. And the training montages would be on BTE and be like the 80s. Eventually, Full Gear comes, but before their match comes, Brock is seen coming up to one of the officials, telling them to have the House of Black come out first, or else. So when the match comes, the House of Black comes out first. They get into the ring, when suddenly, from underneath the ring, pop out the Varsity Blondes, who try to get in a sneak attack to prevent a supernatural advantage from the House of Black. But it doesn't work, as the lights go out, and when they come back on, Malachi, Brody, and Murphy are all on one side, and the Varsity Blondes are on the other, confused. And then, the House of Black get the pounce, chucking Brock and Pillman out, and they focus on Griff and start beating him down in the ring, each of them going for hard-hitting moves. Brock and Pillman try to get in, but Julia Hart won't let them. Brock would usually chuck managers out of the way, but he couldn't to Julia because that would risk the groups falling apart. All they could do was keep trying to get through as Griff keeps getting beaten. But every time they tried for a cover, he kicked out every single time. Whilst not getting in much offense, he was able to hold on for a long while. Then, House of Black tries to end things with the trios finisher. However, Brock and Pillman finally find an opening, reverse the trios finisher, and tag Griff out, with Brock coming in against Malachi, as the Varsity Blondes finally start getting the offensive, with Brock putting in hard work on Malachi and Brody King, as Brian tries to tend to Griff. But Julia Hart is making it really hard to do so by distracting Pillman. Eventually, Brody tags in Murphy, and Brock rushes for Pillman to tag him out, and they do so, with Pillman and Murphy having an air battle, and Griff finally starting to recover, because Brock is keeping Julia from getting to Griff by blocking her at every turn. Julia tries to beat him down, but Brock is undeterred. However, Malachi comes in, and finally manages to get Brock down onto the mat, and Julia starts coming towards Griff. But he runs up to the ropes just in time to make the hot tag to Pillman, as Murphy had worn him out. Griff comes in and finally gets some damage in on his own, and it looks like he's gonna get the pin on Buddy Murphy, when suddenly, the power goes out again. And when it comes back, it's Malachi in the ring, seemingly refreshed. Griff had nothing left, as Malachi gets off his finish. 1, 2, 3. House of Black are the new AEW Trios champions, as they sort of celebrate. I don't know how they celebrate victories. The Varsity Blondes are just collecting themselves to leave. But then, the power goes off and on again, and the House of Black are gone. Then, the Titantron shows Malachi again. "Well, young lions, you have managed to lose the one thing that you have worked towards. However, even in defeat, I sensed your lion hearts still not crushed. I sensed your pack unity stay intact, but it has weakened. It may never break, but it also has a chance to. You shall probably not heed this warning from the house, but know that now you're in the hardest part as a lion's pack. Who's the Omega? Who is the Alpha? Who is the follower? Does it matter? Will this fight tear you apart? Or will you overcome it and continue to live in the pack? Then the Titantron goes back to normal, and the Varsity Blondes just decide to leave in their tour bus. That's where we will leave things for now. The fantasy clock now counts the Varsity Blondes' total reign in the series with the belts at 175 days as of November 19th, but it is over. We're in the tour bus with the Varsity Blondes on BTE as they're recollecting themselves from what had transpired that night. Griff seeming the most upset, but not showing it. As the tour bus made it to the next location, Brian and Brock were asleep. However, Griff wasn't, and he quietly snuck out of the bus, made a call, got on an Uber, and drove into the night. And now we're gonna do something sort of similar to what the Young Bucks did on BTE that they were about to do, but then they didn't. As he's on the Uber, we see him text to the Varsity Blondes group chat, "Guys, I'm sorry for doing this, but I need a break. I failed you guys in the worst possible way, and I need to go on a journey to heal. This isn't me leaving the team for good. I love you guys, but I just need time to heal. Goodbye for now, Griff." And when the sun comes up, he sends that message as he gets on a plane. Brock and Pillman, when they wake up, are absolutely stunned by this. Brock is seemingly about to become angry about it, but Brian steps in and says, "Hey man, I know this sucks, but I've known Griff for a long time. We should let him have a break. He's managed to do so much for us. I think the best thing we can do is to give him his space, alright?" Brock soon calms down and says, "Okay, we'll let him have a break, but at some point, he'll need to come back." Brian says, "Don't worry, he's a loyal guy, he'll come back." So now, the Varsity Blondes continue without Griff Garrison, as they now start getting into the tag division. Their first tag team match on Rampage is against Daddy Magic and Angelo Parker. It's clear that the Varsity Blondes' tactics start to suffer without Griff, so they have to fight harder in order to win their match. Brock and Brian also really struggled, because usually Brian and Griff would be doing more of the tag work, but Brock found it hard to work in that type of situation, so several miscommunications happened throughout the match that nearly cost them. However, thanks to their strength and hearts and determination, they managed to pull away with that win. Their next match was with Best Friends on Rampage. However, they nearly lost that match because of Best Friends' insane synchronization and Danhausen causing a distraction, and it was a low blow that the ref didn't catch by Brock, which gave them the win. Clearly, they were continuing to struggle with their lack of synchronization, until on that BTE, whilst hanging out in the cafeteria, the Workhorsemen come up, and JD says, "Hey, I've seen you two boys are struggling working together. Well, me and Anthony here can help y'all out. However, in exchange, you fight us on Dynamite." They agree, and by the time of their Dark Elevation match with the Kingdom, they had become just as good a tag team as Brian and Griff were, thanks to the Workhorsemen's training, and thus were able to defeat the Kingdom. So they head to Dynamite and are ready to put on a tag match with the Workhorsemen. However, when they're in the ring before the bell rings, Top Flight's theme play, and they come out saying, "Hey, there is no way we are letting this match happen, because we were also promised a tag match on Dynamite by Tony Khan." But before they can continue, Private Party's theme plays, and they come out saying, No. We haven't been on this show in years. It's time for us to get back on track by defeating the Varsity Blondes." Suddenly, Paul White, who yes, I'd assume he'd be ready to commentate on Dynamite at this point, would get an important message from Tony Khan, and comes out to the stage saying, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen,
I have been informed this match will turn into a 4-way number 1 contenders tornado match for the AEW Tag Team Championships. So Private Party and Top Flight rush down to the ring, and the match begins, with Top Flight focused on Private Party and the Varsity Blondes going against the Workhorsemen, with Brock and JD Drake going at it with hard-hitting action, both men refusing to go down, and all the while Private Party and Top Flight going at it both on the inside and outside of the ring. When suddenly, Anthony comes to Brian and suggests taking Private Party out, and he agrees. So they head over to Mark, and they both do a combined brainbuster to the mat, and they both chuck him into the barricade. Mark is counted as knocked out by the ref and is eliminated from the match. Isaiah is surprised by this, but before he can think, Brock gets a surprise roll-up on Isaiah and gets the pin, thus eliminating Private Party, as now Top Flight are focusing on JD Drake. However, the Varsity Blondes and Workhorsemen decide to work together and get a 4-way combined finisher on Darius and Dante, thus eliminating them from the match. Now, it's down to what it was supposed to be, Workhorsemen and Varsity Blondes. They continue going at it for a bit, all 4 fairly trading beats, as this is also meant to be their final lesson in becoming a truly good tag team. Eventually, Brock and Pillman get a combined Spinebuster Air Pillman finisher on both JD Drake and Henry, and get the win on the Workhorsemen, making them number 1 contenders for the AEW Tag Team Championships. However, they are respectful to the Workhorsemen and shake hands in the ring, and they all stand out there in victorious celebration. Suddenly, the Gun Club comes out. Yes, I do think they keep their tag titles up to now, making the reign 300 days. And Austin starts saying, "Oh wow, you blonde-ass boys managed to beat a couple of jobber factions and magically get an opportunity at our titles. This is some of the cheesiest bullshit that has ever come from this company." Then Colton interjects, "Can we just not with them? They're so stupid, and they wouldn't be here if Griff didn't ditch them for a bit of self-pleasure." Brock then gets on the mic. "Hey, you don't talk about one of our boys like that, and if you do it again, we'll make sure you end up going back crying to daddy ass." Colton yells, "We are not ass boys, we are champion men." Austin says, "Yeah, manly men." Colton says, "We ended FTR's legacy." Austin says, which was a stupid and worthless one to begin with. But before they can do another comedic line, Brian yells, "Shut up before we chuck you off the Titantron." So the Gun Club runs away. December 13th is the week of the championship match between Varsity Blondes and the Gun Club for the AEW World Tag Team titles. The match is just the 2 teams trying to punch each other as hard as possible because many lines had been crossed. But eventually, the Varsity Blondes win, but of a disqualification as Colton used the low blow that Aubrey Edwards sees. Then, the Firm comes out and start laying a beat down to the Varsity Blondes. As they do so though, the Workhorsemen's theme plays, and they come out to help the Varsity Blondes. But even then, the numbers are still too great, and they're down too. Soon, Big Bill is about to finish off Brock Anderson. Griff Garrison had flown out to Hawaii as he needed to take some time off after everything that had happened to him for the past couple of months. He needed to relax, but he also remained in shape for when he was ready to come back too. He'd hang out on the beach and surf, go for runs along the beach, and even started meditating. But over the course of 4 weeks, he couldn't bring himself to come back. Those words from Kenny, all the other words from other people, and all the things that House of Black did were eating away at him. But not completely, as this meditation started to keep him at least mentally okay, but still not 100%. He was sitting on the beach when someone grabbed his shoulder. It was Jungle Boy. Insert Griff Garrison looks like Jungle Boy joke here. "Hey man,
You doing alright? Griff saw Jungle Boy and was surprised, but still down. No. Jungle Boy sat down with him. You know, I heard you had lost a big championship match, and then just left? Griff replied, well, you should have seen what I have been through. The House of Black, Julia. They've now left me so scarred, I don't know if I should go back. Jungle Boy then thinks for a bit and says, I've failed too. I've failed when defending a title. I've failed at points that really mattered. Hell, I've even failed to see the pieces of shit in my life until I actually failed. And I've been scarred by all of it too. But I didn't let it stop me from pushing forward. I didn't let it stop me from burying Christian Cage. I didn't let that stop me from trying to challenge MJF for a title shot I've still yet to receive. Because scars heal, and they're trying to make you stronger. He then gets up and puts his hand out. You may look like Jungle Boy, but you are your own person with your own life. Come back to that life. Griff is inspired by this and takes his hand and does a cool muscular handshake with Jungle Boy. So, they get on a plane and head out to the next Dynamite show, which is on December the 13th. They get there by the 11th and go their separate ways, but Griff's phone was broken and he couldn't contact his team, so he looked around for them. And everywhere he goes, we see people welcoming him back. We see him struggle to find his teammates throughout BTE, as we see him in every segment, either in the background looking for his team, or interrupting the segment saying, have you guys seen Brock and Brian? And everyone not knowing where they are, when they are training with the Workhorsemen. The night of Dynamite comes, and he still doesn't know where they are. When he finds his team's locker room, he goes inside all elated, but finds no one there. As he looks around disappointed, Jungle Boy suddenly runs up to his room. Griff, your teammates are out there, and they're getting beaten down. Follow me. Griff is shocked, but determined to go help his team. He makes it to where they go to prepare for their entrances, and make them, and rushes out. Before Big Bill can finish Brock off, City Lights play again, and outruns Griff Garrison. He reaches the ring and spears Big Bill to the ground, and beat up all the other members of the firm, even breaking Stokely's glasses. Eventually, Brock, Brian, and the Workhorsemen regather and beat back the firm. Then, Brock and Brian see him, and they all hug it out. BTE. The Varsity Blondes and the Workhorsemen are all hanging out, and Brock and Brian are elated to see their friend finally coming back after so long. But they asked who or what made him come back, and he goes, well, it took someone who looked a lot like Jungle Boy. But that doesn't matter now, because I am back, and we all have one goal in mind now, the firm. We need to drop kick their asses. They fucked all of us, and now, at Winter is Coming, we'll make them pay. All of us, together. By the way, how do we meet the Workhorsemen? And so they get into some chatful banter for the rest of the segment, and Griff also cooks up a plan to take down the firm. So, Winter is Coming arrives, and it's a 5-way tag team match. Even Stokely's in this match, as HFO had managed to pull out of the firm. Yes, I do think that faction would come back, it would just be booked better. And thus the match begins. Griff Garrison is going at it with Ethan Page, while JD Drake takes the offensive against Stokely. The other firm members become distracted with this, but it was a plan cooked up by the Varsity Blondes and Workhorsemen. As the Guns and Morrissey move in to help Stokely, Pillman, Anthony, and Brock leading the charge get the sneak attack in, making it incredibly hard for them to get Ethan Page out of the match. Whilst the rest of the firm members are all down within 5 minutes, only one managed to keep standing, and that was Morrissey,
who managed to suplex JD Drake and take out Bryan, Brock, and Henry, just in time to tag Ethan Page out. At this point, Griff had started to wear out, but he refused to quit. As the match continues, Morrissey continually tries to get a submission hold on Griff to make him pass out, but he just wouldn't go down. He then tries to chokeslam him and pin him, but he still would not quit and kicks out. Griff managed to get some offense in on his own, as Morrissey can't make sense of this guy's endurance. But then, Stokely gets up along with Ethan Page, and Stokely tells Ethan to distract the ref. He does so, as Stokely grabs a chair and tries to get into the ring. But then Bryan suddenly gets up, full of energy, and trips Stokely up. This had also been a part of the plan. Suddenly, Brock, Anthony, and Drake all get up. They pounce at this, and through a coordinated effort, manage to get Stokely tagged into the ring, with Morrissey being chucked out by both Bryan and Griff. The final part of the plan was put into motion, as first, JD Drake gets off a drill bit. Then, Brock Anderson gets a brainbuster, followed by Anthony Henry getting a frog splash, and straight after, Pillman getting an air Pillman on. Finally, Griff Garrison gets off a devastating spear, and gets the 3 count. The Varsity Blondes and Workhorsemen had beaten the Firm, and celebrate in the ring. But Stokely, exhausted as hell, gets on the mic and says, "You may have beaten us today, but we'll be back." However, Griff says, "Actually, no. You didn't read the contract for this match." If you've seen that segment between Jon Moxley and MJF, you'll know where this is going. Ahem. Should the Varsity Blondes lose, they are to join the Firm and become their bitch boys. Should the Varsity Blondes win, the Firm is to immediately disband. All contracts with said group are voided, with all wrestlers except match contracts, and Stokely Hathaway is forbidden from starting up another group again. So, na 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 na, na 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 na, hey hey, goodbye. All the wrestlers who worked for Stokely, now knowing what has happened, now knowing they won't be paid and don't have to listen to Stokely anymore, all chased him out of the arena. And thus the Firm dies. On that BTE, the Varsity Blondes and Workhorsemen celebrate in the Varsity Blondes locker room. Brock said, "This is the coolest match we have ever had. Great plan, Griff Garrison. You'd be our MVP if we had an MVP award." Griff Garrison appreciates this comment. Then Drake gets up and says, "Well, boys, it's been fun hanging out with you guys, but me and Henry need to get going. But if you ever need us again, we'll be ready." Bryan says, "Sure thing. Who knows, you guys could dye your hair blonde next time we work together." Everyone laughs at this. Then Griff says, "You know what? Before you go, let's all do the chest bump together." They all agree. They all do the chest bump, then jump in midair with a freeze frame. 80s. Now, this isn't the end of the group's existence in this universe. However, this is the end of the fixing they needed to be really good. So there you go. I fixed the Varsity Blondes, and they'd be a main event trios group if they did it mostly my way. I hope to God that they don't break up this faction AEW. God, I really hope they don't do it. Don't do it. But we can only hope. This concludes this cup of fantasy tea. Oh, when you dream of city life.